Yeah, she's coming in right now.
Okay, great. Well, Wendy is joining, so we have all of our members. So I'd like to call the Light Board meeting for April 26th to order. And the first thing is we have meetings coming up on May 10th and May 24th are our next two meetings, and all the rest of the meetings are listed on our agenda. Now I've seen that we have, it looks like 2 sets of minutes ready to go. Pam, do you want to lead the minutes and tell us what we're ready to approve?
Well, we're ready to approve the December meeting minutes that not December, February 22nd, I guess, that I'm at a disadvantage because my computer system isn't working, but I sent you minutes for that I think are ready to go. I think it's the February ones. Also, I just received the December 14th minutes, I believe, for review, and I'm going to get those out fairly soon. There's a substantial backlog, nevertheless, especially because we've been meeting twice a month.
Okay. Have the board members had a chance to review the minutes from February 22nd?
Yes.
Great. Could I ask Alice Alice, do you mind making a motion to approve the minutes?
I do. I will be happy to, but I also want to say that I believe the minutes from February 28th, our public forum, are also ready for approval for today.
Yeah, I was going to do one at a time.
Oh, okay. So I should have registered a little more clearly the dates of the minutes Pam referenced. December. I move that we approve the minutes for December 16th and
So
for February 22nd. Yeah.
February 22nd. Oh, she just got the December one.
Yes.
I said that the December one had just been delivered to me, and I was going to be giving it a review and sending it out soon.
So is that we're only approving the February 22nd ones?
Exactly. You haven't seen the
There we
December
go.
one.
So moved.
All right. So we have a motion to approve the February 22nd minutes as edited. And we have a second from Warren. Alice.
Yes.
Wendy.
Yes.
Pam.
Yep.
And Warren.
Yes.
Yes, and I've also reviewed, and I think we're all set to go. So yes. Now let's talk about the public forum minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review?
Yeah.
Yes. I had comments from I think just about everyone.
Great.
I did not review because I did not attend. I was very unhappy not to attend, but I didn't.
Did Pam?
I counted that in as having reviewed. She looked at them, said, "Oh, I wasn't there. I have no comments."
Yeah. No, I was teaching that night. I couldn't go. But I did watch it, and it looked good to me.
Excellent. Does anyone want to have any discussion about them? Seeing none, Alice, do you mind making a motion for approval of these minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes from the public forum on February 28th.
Great. Second from, I'm going to give Wendy the second this time.
It's a gift for you, Wendy.
All right.
So generous.
Warren.
Yes.
Wendy.
Yes.
Alice.
Yes.
Pam.
Abstain.
Abstain. Great. And I'll agree as well. So 4 approvals, 1 abstention. Excellent. All right.
Actually, I won't abstain. I take that back. I saw it. I looked at it quickly. I'm going to go for it. Why not?
Great. Unanimous. All right.
Sorry.
So we've now approved the minutes, and we can move on to the next topic, which is a follow-up from that February 22nd meeting on the time of use opt-out rate. Dave, would you like to take this?
Yeah. Laura, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. No, that would be good. Let's take a quick look if it's okay to share my screen. I'm just going to bring up the numeric example that the board had requested seeing when we were talking verbally about what the opt-out rate would look like. And so I'm just gonna bring that up on the screen. Sorry. If you remember, we had talked about maintaining the same structure for the opt-out rate. And by structure, I mean having it continue to be a tiered rate where higher levels of usage were charged a higher per kilowatt hour rate. But we were going to make it 4% higher than the base rate. And I did do some research on the 4% higher, and Baker Tilly and I had looked for other municipals that had done a system-wide opt-out rate. And we found Sacramento Municipal Utility District had done one. And when they rolled theirs out, they made the opt-out rate 4% higher. And so, not knowing any better ourselves, we decided to rely on their analysis and to suggest that 4% premium was appropriate to try to discourage people from using the opt-out rate, and yet not make it so punitive that it was vastly more costly for those who did choose to opt out. So if you see in this example, the tier 1 R1 rate all in, if you add energy distribution and the first tier of capacity.
Sorry to interrupt, Laura. Do you mind zooming in? Those numbers are really kind of small.
Okay.
There we go.
How's
Thank
that?
you. It's great.
Okay. So the tier 1 R1 rate in the base case is 19.1 cents. Tier 2 is 20.4 and tier 3 is 22.7. What the board, I believe, wanted was to make the opt-out rate 4% higher than this total rate. And so the rate would be, this is simply 1.04 times 19.12. So the tier 1 R1 rate would be 19.9 cents. Tier 2 would be 21.2 and tier 3 would be 23.6. However, when we actually work this out into the different elements of the rate, the energy would stay the same, the distribution would stay the same, and therefore all of that additional 4% falls into the capacity rate. This is just a calculation of the 4% higher rate minus the two elements that stay the same. And so this is what the capacity would be. And if you add the sum of the components, you'll see that you get the 19.885, the 21.2, and the 23.6. So that would be for a customer who agreed to an AMI smart meter, but did not want to go onto the time of use rate. This is what they would pay down here. You also asked for an example of a customer that opted out of both the time of use rate and also did not want the AMI meter. And we've already agreed to a one-time fee of $75 to install a non-communicating meter, and an additional incremental customer charge of $20 a month to read that meter. So the 75 is one time. That customer would continue to get $38.50 customer charges, and they would pay that same 4% higher opt-out rate for the non-time of use rate. Is that what people had in mind?
Yes, that is what I thought we had landed on. I would only ask that the meter reading fee of $20 be a separate line, such that people who have a non-AMI meter can know that the reason that they're charged that $20 is for someone to drive the truck out to their house and read the meter.
Carol, do you think that would be an issue?
No, we'll just need to work with NISC to have our bill print programming modified, but it should not be an issue.
Okay, good. All right, then we can do that, Brian.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so all of the additional 4% would be within the capacity charge.
Correct.
And those are tiered, so it wouldn't. It's the same value added to each of the tiers. The value doesn't increase like the tiers increase. Is that correct?
Right.
That 4% value?
Well, the way that these figures are derived is that the total cost in the base case is increased by 4%.
Mhm.
And this is solved for so that this number, when added to the energy and the distribution, equals this number. So these numbers down here are our target, and these are the dependent variables that come out of taking this number and subtracting off the energy and distribution.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any other questions? I think this is pretty accurate to what we were requesting on the 22nd, according to the minutes.
Just pretty.
I would say it is accurate.
Great, and you needed us to,
I have a question.
yes,
I just want to, I understand that this is very readable and understandable. The increase in the rates across the board on first, second, and third tiers look really tiny, and I'm wondering what is the value of adding the 4%? There's not much of a driver here that would say that we get anything, and our customers will have a greater understanding of the impact of choosing to opt out or not to have an AMI meter. That I know I don't want to have I don't want to penalize anybody for choosing to opt out, because people may have some really good reasons, or for either time of use or the AMI meter. But I'm wondering, what is the value to the light plant of charging 4% more?
So
I know we already had this discussion and we closed it, and I'm looking at the numbers now and I'm thinking, you know, it seems marginal across the board to me.
So in my viewpoint, Alice, I think, 4%, when you think about it, is kind of a small number, which is what you're remarking upon, that these figures don't seem very much higher. On the other hand, I think the desire on our part was to make it not be a great deal to opt out. And so if you think about 4% more from a CD perspective, right? If you have money and you're looking to, make sure you get as much from that as you can, you're going to put it in a 5% CD if you can find it, versus 4% versus 3%. Over time, that 4% would not be a good deal for someone who opted out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it does add up, I think. But we don't want it to be so punitive that the people that are opting out for other reasons are, paying a huge premium.
I'm just saying, I think I understood the reason we were talking about a 4% is because we wanted to incentivize folks to, be in the time of use rate for a number of reasons that are beneficial to both the customer and to the light plant.
Mhm.
So I was just remarking that seeing these numbers, and I really appreciate seeing it this way, don't seem to have that value to me, and probably not to a customer when the rate goes up less than a penny. That I just wondered whether we still think that a 4% charge to opt out is reasonable, whether it has any long-term. I guess you're saying the long-term benefits of the light plant might be there, but it's not apparent at the moment.
so
Maybe Warren has another take on it.
yeah, so to summarize, Alice, you feel that the 4% doesn't really give enough of a disincentive for people to stay on time of use. Okay,
That would be my take.
yeah. Warren,
Yeah, I think it's hard to know, and Alice's concern is valid. On the other hand, I think the most important thing is not the actual number, it's the fact that folks know they're gonna have to pay a penalty or a premium if they don't go to time of use rate, and the mere fact that they're paying that, and if we just emphasize that this is gonna be a 5% additional amount you'll have to pay, a 4% additional amount you have to pay, that number's gonna be more winning than the difference between 0.1912 and 0.1988, which I'm not sure people will even look at.
Right.
Yeah, and I feel that we can start with a 4%, as we discussed back then, because we don't want to see people who have high peak demands going to the opt-out to save money because 4% is set too low. But at the same time, we don't want to penalize those that don't want an AMI meter and go to this opt-out too extremely. So I think starting with 4%, and if we see a lot of people opting out but keeping a smart meter, well, then maybe we can change that percentage in the future, because we do have that ability with the way the rates are written. Does that kind of satisfy your concern, Alice?
I'm still thinking that the value of 4% surcharge to opt out
Is too low.
seems, well, not that it's too low, that it was presented here, and I know there was a reason for choosing 4%, and I appreciate Laura's research and figuring out what other utilities have done. It doesn't seem to have a value to the light plant at this rate, except over time. And the value, we weren't looking, we were looking at something that said to people, we really want this to be our base rate as time of use for a whole lot of reasons that benefit the light plant and our meter and our ability to manage our system. And if you opt out, you just have an old meter.
You're removing those benefits.
But I think we've heard that there are only less than 50 people who had so far expressed any interest.
Yeah. So, and most of those people were expressing the interest in not having a smart meter.
Mm-hmm.
Rather,
Which has also an already, it has a one-time fee and a meter charge for coming out and reading the meter.
right.
Unless, and if somebody chooses to read their own meters, take a photo and send it in, which
That-
I think we discussed at a meeting. There are people who felt they could just take a photo of the meter, show you what their rates are. You don't have to drive a truck out. You don't have to read it. Here's what I have.
yeah, that's a level of trust we can't really have with customers to self-report their consumption.
Well, it's not only a level of trust, but the administrative, it would cost us more than $20 probably, Alice, to process that on a monthly basis. Somebody would have to receive the photo. We'd have to find a place to put it. We'd have to, there would be staff time involved in doing that as well.
Okay.
So I feel that these numbers look good. I just would like to see the call out for driving the truck on the bill. The 4% is starting point. If we find that there is a good number of people opting out because they feel they can save money avoiding peak times, then we can change that percentage in the future. I don't want to rehash our discussion from the 22nd on this too much, but I want to make sure that members are comfortable with this as it's laid out. A quick thumbs up if we're generally comfortable with what is presented. Yeah, okay. Good. Any other questions from the board on this agenda topic?
Nope.
Okay. Wonderful. Pamela Dritt, I'm going to let you make a comment on this specific topic, but please make it brief.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm in a doctor's office. Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green. At the last Concord Green board meeting, somebody, a member of Concord Green volunteered about how he was going to have the choice of changing from meters, and he assumed that therefore everybody else was, and he wanted to say that he was going to keep the old meter because it's worked great for him, and it's always, why make a change?
Yeah.
We're going to have a big education push because I think there's a large number of people who don't like change, and they are, if the default is to stay how you are, and it's not very clearly a disadvantage to do that, I think we'll have the majority of people doing that. So.
Okay, so it is going to become, the time of use is the default rate, which means that everyone is going to be on time of use in the future. So if he doesn't do anything, he'll be on time of use. He has to request to be on this rate.
And does everybody get a new meter no matter?
Yes, because
Okay.
Can you, Dave?
So his idea was not true. It was misinformed.
Dave, we're replacing all of the next grid meters, correct?
Yes, we're replacing all of the meters, not just the next grid ones.
Okay,
But the plan is to replace all residential and commercial meters throughout town.
so if he wants to do nothing, he will default to time of use. He has to actively request to opt out of time of use and use this rate. But in either case, he's going to have his meter replaced because it needs to be able to talk to our system.
Thank you.
All right. So going on to the next agenda topic, I wanted to talk about ETS transition to time of use. Dave, did you want to talk about this, or I could take a
Yeah,
lead?
let me kick it off. I'll go through the history and then we can get into the topic.
Great.
So, you know, some of you may be aware that the light plant purchased 5 ETS heaters in 1993. That was kind of the kickoff to the program. And in 1998, we had our first customer installing ETS. The rate at the time was set at 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. We started offering rebates. The control period in 98 was 10 hours per day. As we progressed in 2001, we had, you know, just over 20 customers, ETS customers at that point. 2002, the rate was 4.658 cents per kilowatt hour. In 2003, it went up to 5 cents, and it stayed that way until 2009, where it went up to 5.5 cents. In 2011 through 14, we really started marketing the program. 2013, the rate went up to 6 cents. And then in 2015, we had about 140 customers, ETS customers, which equated to about 3.89 megawatts of capacity. The rate was still 6 cents. We did try a pilot in that period through the APPA deed grant program. We had 7 customers participating in the regulation market through V-Charge. That turned out not to be favorable for us based on what it would do to the units themselves. So we discontinued that. 2017 is when we made the change to the rate to match the energy charge. So at that time, it was 6.418 cents per kilowatt hour. And that continued as the energy rate changed. So did the ETS rate. 2018, it went to 7.418 cents. 2021, just over 8 cents. And then just last year, the rate changed where it still matched the energy charge, but there was a small distribution charge included, which was 0.0015 cents per kilowatt hour. Today, we have 3.9 megawatts of capacity from ETS on the system. I think there's just over 140 customers still. So it's still a very beneficial load for us. It's off peak for the most part. It helps the load curve, and with us controlling it, it doesn't impact the peak. So that's a little bit of the history of ETS and where we are. It's hard to believe it's been around for 30 years at this point. But that gives you kind of a little idea behind the history of the rates and the program itself. And I think the piece here that we need to discuss is, as we transition to time of use, do we continue to have an ETS rate, or does it default to time of use? And that's a discussion that I think the board needs to have. I think from an operational standpoint, it's very important for us to still control when those charge. If that 3.9 megawatts kicks on during the peak, that is not favorable for the light plant or the ratepayers. So that's where I think the discussion needs to go, is what do we do here?
Sorry, I was still muted. Yeah, so that is what we need to discuss. Is this rate right now is lower than any expectation for the off-peak rate. And these customers, have been customers for a while. And, we've talked about ETS in the past, and how its rate is lower than lower than it should be, because it doesn't collect for the distribution fees. The problem is that these customers have a high load, so any rate impact can, a penny added to their rate has a real impact on their total bill pretty largely. So we need to be sensitive to that, but we also need to be fair to the other ratepayers. And time of use is designed to price things throughout the day and provide an accurate pricing structure that all devices can conform to. So the question that we have today, I had sent an email that I had written to Hal back in February 5th that kind of outlined the problem, where we have a lot of specialty rates in our existing rate structure that provide different pricing, especially off peak, because we were adapting from this flat rate structure because we didn't have the meters that could provide hourly data. Well, now we do. And how do we bring all of these specialty rates to conform with this time of use? And that's the discussion today. Warren, you have a question.
Yeah, I have two questions. The first one is, have these customers benefited financially up till now from having installed their systems? Have they basically, has it been a good investment up to this point for them?
So my understanding is yes, they received, and maybe Dave, you could give more, or Laura, you could give more specifics on this, but they received rebates when they installed, and the last customer that was added to this program was 2014. So they've had many years of a lower than what others would pay rate. So they've received no cost for distribution for many years. So I would assume that they are in the black on these systems, but I would like to ask Dave and Laura to kind of chime in.
Sure. So just to make sure we're clear, the last rebate was issued in 2015, not 2014.
Okay,
And the total amount of rebates that were issued was just over $394,000 across the 140 customers. So it was, a program that we were really pushing, and we were successful with the marketing that was done through 2011 to 2014. And so I think it's been a favorable program for them financially.
But I think in some ways it was nice that there were rebates, but the rebates are somewhat irrelevant to the calculation as to whether their purchase of those systems was a good investment or not. Do we have data that they've saved money as opposed to having a more conventional heating system?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I'd have to look at, oil and gas prices over the years, but, my recollection, it's been favorable, right?
Okay.
Because the rates that I referred to earlier were based on, the off-peak prices. So, I think they did have a benefit. I don't know, Laura, do you want to add anything to that?
No, thanks.
So, and then my other question is, if we switch these customers to time of use rates and eliminate the special rate, what would be the impact on their bills?
So we haven't run those calculations yet. I think that's something that's needed. In the first discussion we had today, Laura had an example of what the board was looking for. I think we'd want to do the same thing with a handful of different ETS customers. We have full furnace customers, we have partial room customers. So I think we'd want to run the numbers so that you guys could actually see if we transition a customer to a time of use, what the difference would be. And then if we kept the special rate, what that would be as well.
I mean, what I can tell you off the top is that 6 cents on the annual usage of some of these customers would be, in the thousands of dollars per year. So it'd be a substantial increase. The other thing that might be useful to look at is the way that Baker Tilly allocated costs to the ETS customers versus the residential customers. And if I can share my screen again, Dave, I will show that to you. This is at 175%, Brian, can you see it?
I can.
Okay, so this was Baker Tilly's what they call their unbundled cost summary. So the way they attributed cost to the customers. The first thing you'll notice is that in power supply, the power supply expense for the ETS customers, because of their unique load shape, where it's almost exclusively from 10 p.m. To 6 a.m. and then a 2-hour boost during the cheaper portion of the day. And because they don't, with that load profile, they'll never hit any capacity or transmission expenses. So the power supply cost is half of what it would be for a residential load shape. 12.57 cents for power supply costs for residential R1 and 6 cents for ETS. The part that Brian's talking about here is they were not allocated any of these costs. Meter operation and maintenance, services, meter reading, billing system. And they were allocated a smaller portion for distribution cost, system costs, substation and transformer. So the total, the subtotal of the distribution for a residential R1 customer is 7.75 cents and 2.63 for ETS customers. And the thinking behind this was that all ETS customers, in addition to their ETS meter, have a house meter.
Right.
So they are paying these types of costs on their household usage, but not on their ETS usage.
Mhm.
The thinking back then was that we shouldn't charge them twice for that. A little bit like, we just talked about a second meter fee and whether it should bear all expenses twice, or if it should be a somewhat lesser amount. So, there's 5 cents here, right here, in lower distribution costs that the ETS customers aren't paying versus a residential R1 load shape. But, there's good reason why their power costs less. It's a question, though, of allocating these types of costs, whether that is appropriate or not. And I don't know if it would work out to be a full 6 cents. If you did this, it might be a little bit less than these amounts. If we added up this, even if it were the same amount, let's just see what that would be. That would be 6.9 versus 7.7. So it still would be a little bit less in distribution than it would be for the residential R1. So anyway, this was the allocation methodology when Baker Tilly did it the last time we did our cost of service study. And so the total cost worked out to be 9.4 cents versus 21 cents for residential.
And if someone has an off-peak demand, like an EV owner, they still pay all of those other fees, correct? They pay the meter, the service costs, the meter reading, the billing costs for that kilowatt hour at night, correct?
That's a good question, Brian. And I looked at this specifically. I could also add a third column, which would be the allocation of the time of use expenses. My expectation is that they were charged these in part because the time of use rate is at sort of a unique rate. It can be used as the whole house rate.
Mhm.
So somebody wouldn't have to have the time of use meter as a second meter. It could be the main meter and the only meter that they're using to pay these costs, or it can be used as a second meter, in which case, if they were allocated these charges, they'd be paying them twice.
Yeah, so the thinking, I'm going to make one more comment. I'm going to let Alice go next. But the thinking back then of not charging these fees was to incentivize the use of ETS. It wasn't necessarily fair collection because other ratepayers, like in my email, I explain, are paying these fees because they don't have this special rate. So this is a very device specific incentive within the rate structure.
I think that's fair to say. The one other thing I'll just point out, Brian, because I know you like to compare the TOU off-peak rate against the ETS rate. Keep in mind that what's considered off-peak under our time of use rate is 10 p.m. to noon.
Yes.
Which is a much longer time period than the ETS systems are allowed to charge. And we do in the winter have morning peaks. So the time of use rate is having to collect for some peak related costs, even though it's called off-peak.
Yes, but we're going to a new time of use rate
Yes.
structure.
Correct.
So yeah. The other thing, the power supply costs, when Baker Tilly looked at these numbers, that 6 cents is avoiding the peak expenses, the R&S fees, the capacity obligation. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So it has nothing to do with generation. Generation is the same price.
Correct.
Alice.
Well, sorry,
go
Brian,
ahead.
generation is not quite the same price because the assumption here on the ETS is that it will be, I believe it was 65-35.
What does that mean?
Sorry, on peak off versus off peak usage. We actually calculated, when we talk about on peak and the noon to 2 period is when these are generally allowed to charge in the winter. We calculated exactly how much ETS usage happened during the on-peak hours and how much during the off-peak. And that was used to develop the cost for generation, whereas an R1 customer, right, has a different load profile and they've got a different amount that's on peak versus off peak. So the generation cost would be different because of the times of day that these devices are on versus what a residential customer would typically use.
That doesn't track with me because generation we contract for at a fixed price per kilowatt. So why would the generation, because the RNS and capacity is the on and off peak, but the generation should be level across all 20.
No, Brian, the ISO trades every hour and there's a different value for every hour. And
And-
we buy our unit on the margin from the spot market.
And so that arbitrage is the value extracted from that arbitrage is being associated with ETS, but not with other customers.
Oh, no, it's associated with all the customers.
With all customers. Okay. Alice, I apologize for the delay. I just got wrapped up. I think you're muted.
Thank you. This is just a clarification question. The program has been in effect now for some 30 years. Is that about right?
Yeah,
Long time.
yeah, we purchased the first ETS units at our old building in '93 and started the program in '98.
So people have had a long-term benefit of having a very reduced rate. I'm wondering whether during the sale pitch time, when we were looking to expand the use of ETS, whether there was any sort of commitment made to the homeowner at that point that their rates would remain at some particularly low value because of the benefit to the light plant, or was it expected that at some point that rate would have to be normalized against the changing rates for the rest of the system? I'm just wondering, are we violating our own contract, as it were, with these homeowners that we would provide this particularly low rate for them, that this would be both a shock and a surprise to their budgeting? If we're talking about a rate change that could increase cost by $1,000 or more, is fairly significant for everyone.
Yeah, so right in the tariff, it does say that the rate is subject to change. But, you know, when the customers installed the units, they based it on the lower price, right? That was what the assumption was. But it's like any other fuel, the price can change, and when that happens, the rate has to change. But the assumption was it was going to be a lower price.
Mhm. I'm just wondering whether they would agree about the assumptions that they would expect to pay $1,000 or more. Even if, you know, we look at the long-term benefit that they probably paid off their investment over the course of the number of years that they've had ETS in operation. I just don't want to violate our public trust about what agreements might have been made at the time of when we were incentivizing folks to go on ETS.
Yeah, I mean, you know, back in the 2014, 2015 timeframe, when this came up, you know, we had customers that basically said, I just installed these units, and, you know, they were concerned with the rates, they did the financials. And that's when we did away with the rebate program itself. Didn't, you know, obviously ETS customers and the rate is still there, but that was 8 years ago at this point. So, you know, I don't think we're at a point where, you know, some of the customers have been on there for 20, 25 years, right? Some have been on for 7, 8, 9 years. So there's a very amount. And I don't know what their paybacks were on their investment and all that. I mean, it would vary per customer. But so yeah,
I just want a clarification that we weren't violating our own agreement with the customer about the installation of the ETS system if we were to change the rates dramatically. I'd like to hear what Warren and Wendy have to say.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were done, so I'll move on to Warren. Warren, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't feel in a position to make any decision about this until we have, you know, those sample numbers of what the impact would be on a range of customers. But let me say two things by way of principles. One is all things being equal, we should be trying to eliminate special rates, get everybody under the same system. And I could see that we want to do something with this group of customers. Having said that, this group of customers does seem different than others in one key way. Yes, there are folks with EVs or heat pumps or something else who have similar load profiles and some situations that are similar in their electricity use. What makes this group of customers different is they installed the device that was done in effect for the benefit and the convenience of the light plant. It was not being done to reduce some societal problem like climate change, and it wasn't being done to accommodate something that the customer wanted, like an electric vehicle. So there's something different, that they were doing this at the urging of the light plant to benefit the light plant. And so they may deserve some special consideration for that reason, although it seems like the benefit they're probably getting now is greater than the reduced rates are greater than they probably should be as when we move to time of use rate.
Wendy. I'm sorry, you're muted, Wendy.
Sorry, hopefully you can hear me. Sort of two things. One is I agree with Warren that I think we want people on a simplified structure not to have special rates. I guess two questions. One is in response to Warren's, did these people install this technology really exclusively at the urging of CMLP? Because I would probably disagree with that. I know that there are some people who are technology savvy and this is just another offering. So one is just that for consideration. The second is that because of the incentives right now, the usage is very constrained to certain periods of time. And I'm struggling a little bit with what happens if we move to time of use. So do those restrictions go away? You know, and what does that do to the light plant? We value that opportunity to control the peak. And so I'm concerned about that. And if we simulate it, you're simulating it on what we have today. We have no way to project what would change under time of use. But maybe I'm missing something here. So I think when we simulate something, we need to consider that.
Well, Wendy, the next topic on our agenda is about load control and providing some kind of incentive for these people to stay under controlled for operation of the light plant. So, you know, the first topic here is about, you know, getting ETS, getting rid of that special rate. But the next topic is to look at, well, what value can we give these customers to stay under a load control? Because there's value in doing that, but it's value that I have a very hard time quantifying. So I consider, you know, a load control credit or something to be more of an incentive to ensure that this load stays in those hours that the utility would like them to be at. Because if the time of use rate is a fair price for different hours of the day, then we could allow all customers just to make their own decisions and operate to lower their own bills. But I think the utility should help people lower their bills because it lowers utility expenses. So we'll get into the load control stuff because we talk about water heating units, about any future things about, you know, pool pumps or thermostats that we might want to control, and that's the next topic. So
I guess it's just tricky because, as Laura said, these customers have a pretty high load. So we need to make sure those incentives work, right? So for credits, whatever.
And they do have a high load. The technology in, you know, the 1990s was essentially to, you know, there's electric baseboard heating, which is a resistance wire that you move air over and it provides heat. And these are very inexpensive to install, but they're very costly to operate because they're inefficient. They're using the resistance of electricity through the wire, and that's not a very efficient way to do it. The bricks, to my understanding, allowed for that time the wire has to run to be shorter because the thermal energy would be stored in that solid brick. And then air could move over those bricks when the house needed to be warmed or cooled. That allowed us to do that time shifting where we could charge it up at night, make it nice and hot, and then throughout the day, the HVAC system could push that through the house, and then we could charge it the next night instead of having a baseboard run 24 hours or during peaks and things like that. So that was the value in the technology prior to heat pumps being on the market, prior to some of these more efficient heating methods. So this is kind of a legacy technology that has some value, especially to the utility for controlling when it operates. So this is a good discussion. I think what I wanted to have come out of this was your thoughts about ETS, about rates, going to a simplified structure, about this transition. I think what I could summarize is the board probably would like to have numbers behind these ideas. So analysis like what was done in the agenda item before, to come back to the board to say, okay, here is the financials of how this will affect the 140 some odd customers and their bills. If we were to just, drop them onto ETS first year, they'd probably have rate shock and be very angry because that'd be a big increase to their bills. So I think we should suggest other transition periods for ETS such that they don't bear a huge shock in year one, and we can discuss how long that can be and so forth once we have the math and some analysis behind it. Alice, your thoughts?
Sorry. Wouldn't we expect the new cost of service study to do that analysis for us and offer the alternatives?
So we've been doing discussion topics for the last few months to help kind of work out the scope of work for that. And then we're getting to the end of the concerns on that last memo that was sent around. So I think we're getting to the point where we're ready to start drafting that. Laura and Dave, do you feel the cost of service study that you've any major questions you think the board needs to answer before that starts to get drafted?
Excuse me, I think, that the list of items that we had on that memo were things that we wanted to work on separate from the cost of service study. And depending on where the board landed on some of these topics, so say the board wanted to keep the ETS rate, then that would go into the cost of service study as well. If the ETS rate is sunsetted and we wouldn't include it in the cost of service. Does that make sense?
Sort of. So some things we'd have the cost of service study address, and other things Laura would do all the analysis for us. Is that basically what I think what I'm hearing from the board is that there's an interest in looking at a more detailed financial analysis of the benefits and costs of the ETF system to the residents. And if we don't have it embedded in the cost of service study, then it would fall to Laura to do that analysis for us. Is that right?
Yeah, I think, on this particular one, I think we need to run some models so that the board can see if an ETS customer was on time of use, what that would look like versus what they're on now. So you can kind of get an idea. And then, I don't think the board can make a decision on this without seeing the numbers.
Right.
That's my feeling.
I agree.
Because, I mean, that would be a bad choice.
Correct.
I think we all agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about the process for doing it since we have this cost of service study about to happen.
So the bill impacts, typically in a cost of service study, the consultant wouldn't do bill impacts for every rate class, particularly like in our case when we have so many. But they typically do them for the R1, to show you how their proposed rates, right, would impact the majority of customers. But the bill impacts is something we can do if we want to model, like we did with the heat pumps, exactly what they would pay under the time of use. That's a pretty intensive study, and only because of our current limitation in the analytical tools. We were able to do it for all the heat pump customers because there only ended up being 23 or 24, I think, who had AMI meters. But in the case of the ETS folks, we would have to do 140. So I think what we can commit to provide to you is rate impact, maybe by sample size of ETS unit, and we probably can't do all 140 like we did for the heat pumps, but hopefully that would give you enough of a window into what, the range of impacts would be to customers that you could make a decision.
Yeah, I feel that would be very helpful.
Yeah, we can do that. I can do that, no problem.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So any other, would any more discussion about this ETS be needed here? Any other thoughts the members would like to share before we move on to load control topic?
Would it be helpful to ask some of the ETS folks that are on this call?
Yeah.
What they're thinking?
Yeah, I see Hal. Hal, do you mind sharing your thoughts? Oh, there we go.
No, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. There is concern in the ETS community that moving to time of use will make our home heating systems expensive compared to other home heating systems, such that my ETS system would make my home a white elephant, and would reduce its value. So that, I think, is the major concern of ETS users as we move forward. I personally am I don't quite understand how distribution is going to be billed under time of use. I thought that distribution was going to be decoupled and moved to the fixed rate. ETS folks are keyed on distribution costs, and so that's another concern. Why would we pay the new fixed rate for distribution and a significant component of the time of use rate distribution expenses? I think that's what ETS people are thinking about right now.
Okay. Yeah, so the distribution collection under the time of use is a topic being discussed. I have a half-written email responding to you from the one I received this morning. But yeah, so I believe at one of our past meetings, we talked about how full fixed collection would be something like $64 a month. And that, collecting that for a small user would be out of the industry norm and would be a burden. The shift from variable to fixed collection would put more burden onto the small customers and less onto the large customers. So we're looking at minimum system design as one way to kind of do a correct amount of fixed collection to decouple and to avoid weather impacts on collection. But then the variable is going to have to continue because the full fixed is just too much for those small users. So, and that would apply to all electricity sold, during all hours. So it would affect the off-peak calculation.
How does that line up with the philosophy of costs being paid by those who incur them?
That would be the the distribution of that energy to those users is collected as they use it. That's the variable philosophy. The fixed is each customer has a cost of connecting to the system. So they need to pay those costs to get the first kilowatt hour. And that is, we haven't concluded on where that separation in those two philosophies lies. Something about 50-50 would probably make sense.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other public comments on this topic for ETS transition? David Allen.
Morning. On this question of collecting the full fixed, it's a discussion we've had, heaven knows, I can't imagine how many times now. It's a discussion that goes back a decade, for goodness sake. It's been known since the beginning of this discussion that if this is to be done right, and of course, right by my definition, but nonetheless, I think it's a correct definition. If it's to be done right, there will be an accommodation for the smaller user. In other words, there will be some shifting from the smaller user over to the rest of the rate base. And it's also been said, again, many times now, there's just no reason not to go ahead and check and collect the full fixed cost. The $64 is the number you identified, Brian. It's not rate shock. It's not changing the total that's being collected, period. There's no argument here for a gradual increase, just doesn't exist. It's false reasoning. It's not reasoning. There is a necessity to moderate the fixed for the smaller user, and that requires some serious thinking about what's the limit on a smaller user, how much is the accommodation, therefore how much is shifted to the rest of the rate base. But it's time that we do this. Time that we stop talking about it. As I said, it's been going on well over a decade. And time to get there. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, David. Warren?
Yeah, I don't want to get into, this is getting off subject, but I just want to go on the record saying I don't agree with David. And I don't agree that we should be trying to collect all the fixed costs of the light plant through a fixed charge. And I have a variety of reasons for that.
Well, we are drifting off of the ETS topic into fixed versus variable kind of discussion. So I am going to move on to the next agenda topic, which is load control credits. Dave, do you want to talk a bit about this, or do you want me to?
Why don't you lead the discussion?
Okay. So the time of use rate is going to price electricity based on expenses for different times of the day. So in theory, customers are in complete control of being able to shift load to times when it's less expensive or more expensive based on their desires. But we have two load control systems in place today, ETS and the hot water tanks. Is there any other load control systems I'm not thinking of that we use today?
Those are the two that are in place. We did do a pilot that was unsuccessful with thermostats, 12 or 13 years ago. And we did do a pool pump test as well. But, those were kind of pilots testing the waters, and the technology wasn't where it is now. And so those didn't work out great, but it's not to say they wouldn't work out in the future.
Yeah, and the Eaton AMI system that we're buying has load control functions in it. Do you feel that those the technology that we're buying into would be robust enough to do something like a pool pump or a thermostat. So we
Yeah.
could see this expanding in the future.
Yeah, I mean, under that program, we do have load control devices coming in to handle the existing customers that we have. It's about 550 load controls between thermal storage heating and hot water tanks. And we could expand that as well, you know, if we created a new program.
Yeah. So the purpose of having this topic on the agenda is a first discussion about this kind of credit, where a device in the home is controlled by the utility and the rate will still fairly collect for the energy that device consumes. So there needs to be a reason for customers to opt into this controlled device program. And how do we want to structure that is my question. So currently we have a special rate for ETS, and we have a monthly credit for hot water heaters. How do we want to structure an incentive to have people participate in load control programs? And Laura, can you give us some sense? I mean, if someone with ETS is under a load control versus someone with a pool pump, I think the ETS customer would provide more load controlled value than something like that. Do you have any guidance on a way you would like to see something structured?
So to me, the difference between providing a cost to use a device during the day versus giving me the right to control that device is what we would call its option value. Because in the former case, I don't really know for sure what people are going to do, right? As you said, Brian, the control's fully in their hand, and I don't have any idea what load is going to be. I'm just going to have to follow it wherever it goes and pay for it. In the case where I'm controlling the device, I know for certain that I'm going to be able to turn it on or off at certain times of the day, and there's value in that, and option value. It's very difficult to quantify, and it's probably something I would need to get help with in the cost of service study to do it appropriately. And I'm not sure even they will know how to do it, but we'll maybe fumble around and get something reasonable. And you're right that certain devices are worth more than others. Let me give you two examples. An ETS unit that's been off all day in a winter month. Okay, it hasn't run since 2 p.m. and it's now 10 p.m. I have a pretty good idea that it's going to turn on at 10 p.m. even if I didn't have the load control, right? Because I had shut it off. And so I know how much load is going to come on at 10 p.m. versus a water heater, which, you know, tends to cycle on and off during the day, depending on people's hot water usage profile. I'm less certain that at 5 p.m., if I should turn that off, that I'm really avoiding peak expenses, because I'm not positive that 4.5 kilowatts would go on anyway between 5 and 8 p.m. Does that make sense? So at 3 o'clock, if I turn the unit off, did I really avoid 4.5 kilowatts of peak usage? Or would it have been off anyway? Whereas with the ETS unit, because I know what the heating needs are, because I'm controlling it, I have a very high certainty that when I turn it off, I've avoided that 4 megawatts of capacity that Dave was talking about. So to me, the question is quantifying an option value for load control. And then I think there may be a different value for different types of devices. That's kind of what I'm thinking, but it's something, again, I would love to get some help with from a professional.
Yeah, this is a first discussion. So this is like blue sky thinking here. So this is the kinds of questions we want to ask in an outside consultant or do some research. Wendy. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. I guess there's sort of one question I had is, and maybe it's just thought provoking, sort of to Laura's point, is there value in controlling the hot water heaters at all? Is it even worth the administration? But that issue aside, I'd be more interested in understanding or having a consultant share some best practices in this area, like what's happening in the market, where's the technology? And, you know, it feels like there's a lot of benefit to ETS, and I'm just not hearing it necessarily for these other types of controls, but I think the consultant could help and inform our decisions.
Laura, do you want to answer the question of the value of that $19 a month credit for hot water heaters? I think you're muted.
I think in the past, we haven't done a deep dive into the actual avoided capacity of the water heaters based on their profiles. We don't have good visibility on them. They're not separately metered. So I can't actually see when they're turning on and off to make an appropriate capacity payment. So I think in the past, we've tended to overvalue it because I think we've made the assumption that the 4.5 kilowatts would be off, you know, that we would be turning it off and avoiding the capacity during that time, when I'm not sure in reality that is what happens. But I don't currently have the tools or the information to make a more informed determination of the value.
Will the AMI systems meter give you better data on those devices if they're not directly metered?
Not unless somehow we have a disaggregation tool in there where the AI knows exactly what a water heater looks like, because it's all going to be metered in one meter, right? I'm not going to have visibility on the.
So there is a thing on the market, a sense meter that you know, a homeowner can install, and it will use software to identify different electric devices, and it's relatively inexpensive, a few $100 or a couple $100. But it is possible for software to identify devices in the home. Warren, you have a thought?
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, I think we want to, where possible, encourage customers to allow the light plant to control their devices, because anything the light plant can do to control the load and reduce costs benefits everyone. I'm not sure why we, once we go to time of use rates, need to pay a special fee, leaving aside the ETS question, which is different, why we need to pay a special fee or incentive to allow the light plant to do that, however, because the benefit to the customer is, hey, the light plant is going to make some decisions about your device, and they're going to do it in a way that's going to reduce your cost, because they're going to reduce some of your use in high peak times. That's the benefit, and that's what we should sell to customers. Allow the light plant to do this for you. It's going to lower your costs.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very valid approach, you know, to say, if you want to lower your bill, you can work with these load control programs, and the light plant will help you do that work. Because this option value, as Laura put it, is Laura's ability to get people onto a controlled system. And it would be something that doesn't it benefits the light plant in being able to know when load is going to happen, but it won't financially benefit by controlling when load happens, because the time of use rate should incentivize customers to do that already. So how would we structure, well, this option value is what we're trying to determine. We could say Warren's idea that customers will want to relinquish control to the light plant in order for the light plant to better ensure they're going to save on their bill. We could look at it from a standpoint of giving a monthly credit of a certain value as an incentive for people to give over control to the light plant. We could make that incentive value based on the device being controlled, like ETS gets a different credit than a hot water heater, and so forth. But that's the discussion today is what are our thoughts around this? Laura.
So I would just point out that when CMLP is controlling these load devices, our incentives are not exactly completely aligned with the customer. Like what Warren was talking about would be if I were arbitraging based on our rate schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus what the light plant would want to do, which is arbitraging based on the wholesale cost of power. And ideally, you want those two things to be exactly the same, but we know from a temporal standpoint, there's a lag, right? It might not be that during a particular day, the best thing for the light plant to do from a wholesale perspective is also exactly the same thing as the best thing to do for the customer from the rate perspective.
And do you feel that there is a quantifiable value in that difference? Like, can we say that our rate structure is accurate on average, but the utility's ability to arbitrage within those time periods could save X cents per kilowatt?
I haven't thought about that enough to give you a proper answer, but I think this plays into the suggestion that Warren had of, why would we need to pay anybody anything?
Yeah.
Because we're going to arbitrage for you. It's not quite right, because I'm not going to arbitrage for you. I'm going to arbitrage for me.
And
yeah.
that will actually arbitraging for the utility and having the rate structure based on utility expenses is a very close alignment.
Yes.
It's not perfect, but very close. And whereas there might be a 10-hour off-peak period in our final time of use structure, you might find that 4 to 5 hours of that time period are more beneficial based on the real market. And it's that arbitrage that you can conduct that could save the utility money beyond what the rate structure would incentivize. And yeah, so that would be that'd be good analysis to have. I don't know how much that work would be to create that. But that would, because what I'm looking for is what is that option value as you described? What is something we can put in front of the customer to say, we'll give you this credit if you allow the utility to control this device, and have that be something that isn't just all ratepayers giving money to some ratepayers to have predictions of when they're going to save on their bill. So that would be helpful. But is there any other thoughts on analysis that would need to be done around this topic of a control credit or control programs, and with others? Is it okay if I go on to some other questions? All right, so Laura.
Yes, Brian. Oh,
Different Laura, sorry.
Good morning, Laura Burns, 479 Main Street in Hingham, Chair of the Hingham Light Board. I just wanted to mention that I've learned that Energy New England is working with Generac to develop a demand response program for their customers, and that I know that all of the Energy New England owners, so that would include Concord and Hingham, have signed up to participate in the program if they get enough customers. I think they need 10 customers and they don't have them yet. But that includes a program where Energy New England would handle the enrollment and the dispatch and all of the things that that might take the time of the light plant's staff. And so I'm wondering if you've factored that into your discussions, whether we're going to participate in that program or not, because I'm interested in thinking about that for us too.
Yeah, so that's interesting because Generac does home batteries. Is that what you're referring to?
No, it's a whole demand response system for, and I think yes, that part of it is you can buy their equipment, but they propose regulating water heaters and water heaters, thermostats, and residential batteries. And then there are some other, and EVs, EV charging. And then there's some other applications in the case of commercial customers that might go a little bit further. So it's kind of like meant to be a whole program.
Right.
So I don't know that we've really presented this too much to the board. I believe Dave's mentioned it in his director's updates, but you know, we're still analyzing it, but it's not perfect for us because there's a limited set of equipment that it works with. Which is not going to be necessarily all the equipment that our town people have. There is a cost to the program. So that has to be factored in, and some other elements. So I don't think, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but we weren't quite ready to make a recommendation to the board with regard to this program, or maybe you are at this point, I don't know.
No, we weren't ready to make a recommendation. A lot of the stuff that they're offering, we already do. And we have capital investment with Eaton that we would basically be throwing out the window. So it's one of those things that we're going to continue to look at in the future and see if some of the parts of it would work for us. But having some of the stuff already covered doesn't make a lot of sense for us at this point. If it was a year ago, it might be a better transition because we wouldn't have committed to new load controls.
Yeah. So we
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so we committed to the Eaton load control system, and that's going to have similar capabilities, which would be helpful. But it would be good to, because I hadn't thought about batteries or some of the other devices. So it'd be nice for the next time this topic comes up for discussion that we list out what are potential load control devices in the home, and kind of think that through as well. Any other thoughts on the putting a value to a load control system for customers?
I think, just my final closing here. It's really important for us to have a load control device program in place. If the 4 megawatts of ETS comes
Hits
on during the peak, it's going to be very costly. And so I think, we need to continue to have a program. What that program is, obviously, is what will come out of the discussion at some point. But I think it's important to continue with it. 4 megawatts is a lot of load. And if that comes on during capacity or transmission peaks, it's going to be costly to all ratepayers.
I agreed. Well, this has been a very good first discussion on this topic. That concludes our agenda. So I'm going to move on to liaison and public comments. Are there any liaison or public comments? Wendy?
Brian, I just want to comment because this is technically my last day on the board.
Oh, we're not letting you go.
I know. Officially, it's my last day. So I just personally just want to issue a big thank you to Dave and Laura and Jason and Matt. I have learned so much from all of you and the whole team. I'm just amazed at how much goes on and the complexity that's involved in running this business, and just want to respect and give you kudos for all that you've done. You really bring best of class service to the town of Concord. And I know it's been said before, but just want to make a chance to say that that's true. I think this board has a lot of demands that it's met, a lot of goals for the town, and a lot of demands from customers. But since over the last 6 years, there's been an incredible amount this board has accomplished. So whether it's, evolving the power supply, it's putting the AMI meters in place, addressing, sort of the broadband infrastructure. There's a lot that's been accomplished, and just kudos to all of you, because it's been a lot of hard work, and it never feels like we can do enough or do it fast enough. But slow and steady has really, really produced a lot of great fruit, if you will. So kudos to all of you and thank you for all your support. It's been great. That's all. And by the way, you still need a member to join the audit committee as well. So just a reminder.
And likewise, Wendy, you've been an invaluable member of the board, guiding us both with a financial acumen and a steady head on your shoulders. You've been an outstanding board member, and I can't imagine how we're going to go on without you.
Well, I'll
Agreed.
continue to support all of you, as you know I will. So wherever I can.
Well, keep us on the calendar for the 10th, just in case.
Okay. All right.
We don't want to let you go yet.
All
All right. Well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. All right.
Second.
Second from Warren. Alice,
Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
Pam. And I agree, Wendy,
Yes.
and I agree as well. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good morning.
Bye.